thank everyone for coming. I really appreciate it. I'm kind of nervous. This is my first venture as booking a lecture on Black history. I do have a great story to tell, but I'm not going to go into it today, maybe some later time. But my great-grandfather was a Buffalo soldier, so that's how I met Charles, is through a group of women. I'm trying to connect my roots, and so that's how I met Charles. But it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Charles Blatcher III, author, publisher, founder, chairman, and principal advocate of the National Coalition of Black Veteran Organizations, but most of all, my friend. I met Charles, I already said that, but I came to appreciate not only Charles' deep knowledge of African American military history, but also his unwavering commitment to preserving and honoring the legacy of Black veterans. So please join me in warmly welcoming Charles Blatcher III. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm going to ask you guys to excuse my seat. You know, Father Time never loses a race, and my back is a little bit bad. Mary, thank you for that wonderful introduction. I do not take the opportunity of speaking in public very often. With all the titles that Mary mentioned that I have, I spend most of my time writing and doing research. But Mary and Linda Thomas asked me to do this, and I was more than happy to accept on this occasion. I'm going to begin with a disclosure. I'm not an expert on Charles Young, nor consider myself an authority on Black military history. True, I probably know more about the subject than most people. However, the title of expert is too limited to my overall interests. I'm an advocate for the preservation of Black military history and social justice. I care about the past, the present, and the future. Borrowing a motto from a legendary soldier, I too serve for race and country. Between birth and death, we live the stories of our lives. I appreciate this opportunity to share a piece of my story with you guys today. As a Navy veteran, the Vallejo Naval Historical Museum is the ideal venue for sharing this piece of my story. I thank the museum for the venue and each of you for your attendance today. My purpose today is to introduce you to how I became involved in leading the advocacy for the promotion of then Colonel Charles Young. I will acquaint you to retired Sergeant Samuel Waller. I can't talk about Charles Young without speaking of Sergeant Waller. He's the gentleman who introduced me to the Colonel's legacy while pursuing my interests in Black military history. I will introduce you to some of the highlights in the Colonel's history that deem worthy the recognition sought on his behalf. If you're interested in the Black military history part of my story, you can find it on YouTube titled A Page in the Life of an Advocate, Charles Young. The impetus for my interest in Charles Young and the advocacy for his promotion began in 1977. With my introduction to retired Sergeant Samuel Waller, a Spanish-American War veteran. Sergeant Waller was the last surviving Black veteran in the state of California. I take pride in the fact that I was introduced to Young's history by someone who was a friend of his. I was invited to be a part of a welcoming committee for retired Sergeant Waller, who was being transferred to the Yachtville Veterans Home in Napa, California. He was 99 years old, blind, hard of hearing, and living alone in Los Angeles. He had outlived all of his known relatives. The state of California declared him a ward of the state. They arranged for his boarding in the veterans home. I recall being there when his travel trunk arrived. The old trunk contained papers Sam held as important. There was a magazine with him and then Mayor Thomas Bradley pictured on the cover, along with other documents and keepsakes. Among the papers was a handwritten letter from his friend, Captain Charles Young. However, the first thing the old soldier asked for was his gun. It was an old service revolver from his military days. The gun was in the trunk. However, someone had wisely removed the bullet chamber. Sam had a demanding tone to his voice and caught the administrator and nursing staff off guard. I stood there imagining a blind centurion with a gun among absolute strangers. Now, what could possibly go wrong under those circumstances? I found the silence and expressions quite amusing. Everyone looked at one another, not wanting to be the one to tell him they were not going to give him the gun. They were concerned about his fragile health and how he would receive the news. I broke the silence, taking Sam by the hand and offering him assurance that he was among friends. My relationship with him grew from that point. On the weekends, I made trips to Yachtville. On nice days, the nurse would get Sam up and in a wheelchair. Off we would go roaming the property. Compliments to the state, the grounds were immaculate. I would normally find a shade tree to park the wheelchair where we could stop and talk. Better yet, where I could sit and listen. On other days, I would sit at his bedside, touch his hand to let him know I was there, and listen. His favorite subject was his military days, when he was a member of the 24th Infantry Regiment. I remember on one occasion, a nurse entered his space and remarked to me, "I hope you're not believing what he's telling you. He can't remember what he had for breakfast this morning." I found her comment to be dismissive at best. I thanked God for Sam's deafness. Surely he would have been offended if he had heard her remarks. My response was, "It really doesn't matter to me. I enjoy his company," in hearing his recollections, true or not. The story of his experience in the jungle of the Philippine Islands rang true to me. He recalled the heat, mosquitoes, strange insects, and the lack of drinking water. I could identify with the heat and the insects. The Philippine Islands was my first duty station out of basic training. He described how he filtered insects and slime off of water puddles they found on the jungle floor through handkerchiefs or cloth to quench their thirst. As he told the story, he grimaced, reliving the thought, and so did I, hearing his recollections. Sam spoke of a black Army officer who he said was the pride of every black soldier, Captain Charles Young. The name was new to me. My knowledge at the time was limited. My focus on the history was primarily World War II, Korean, and Vietnam history. I recall how his voice cracked, reflecting his disappointment and sense of anger, as he stated that Young would have been a general had he not been black. The handwritten letter in his trunk validated his relationship with Charles Young. Few months later, I had the opportunity to visit the National Archives in Washington, D.C. There I found photographs validating the 24th Infantry in the Philippine Islands in 1901. I could not resist passing that information on to the nurse who had questioned the soundness of his recall when I returned to Yachtville. In February 1978, for Black History Month, working with the administration at the Veterans Home, we arranged a ceremony to honor Sergeant Young and Black Army Captain John Clark. Captain Clark was a World War I veteran. Both soldiers received letters of acknowledgement from the Governor of California, then Jerry Brown, and President Jimmy Carter. The event was titled as a Day of Recognition. We had state dignitaries and invited guests in attendance. Castle Mount High School in Oakland, California brought its JROTC drill team to perform for the event. You may wonder how a blind soldier could enjoy a drill team presentation. The precision is heard and felt in the drill cadence. Sam was very attentive to the cadence. Both men enjoyed the presentation and the attention given. Immediately following the event, planning began on the March for Recognition. A 30-day, 600-mile walk from Oakland, California to Sacramento via Los Angeles. The march was planned to raise public awareness about the history and the need to establish a national museum dedicated to the history. I consulted Sam about the plans to let him know things were being done in furtherance of the cause. Sam wanted to join the march that was scheduled to depart from Oakland City Hall on May the 1st, 1978. It took some talking to convince him that his counsel was his contribution. The late Vietnam veteran William Lewis and I promised to do the walking for him. With his acceptance of our promise, Sergeant Waller made two requests. First, that we not let the black military contribution be written out of American history. And second, we get Charles Young the recognition he deserved. Sergeant Waller gave me a job that has consumed the better part of my life. I accepted the job with that understanding, along with the promise of doing the best I could. It was a challenge. I had no idea how to build a museum or get a promotion for a dead soldier. The march taught me a valuable lesson about faith and patience. I discovered that sometimes the impossible is possible with both, and with understanding the principle of one step at a time. The march concluded at the state capitol on May the 31st, 1978. Who was Charles Young? Sam spoke so passionately about Charles Young, I could hardly wait to find out who he was. I discovered he was a man of historical significance, a man born into slavery and through willpower and perseverance became the third black graduate of the military academy at West Point and the highest ranking black officer in the United States Armed Forces in the early 1900s. His military career spanned over 3 decades, serving under the motto, "For race and country." His service paved the way for the first black general in the regular armed forces, Brigadier General Benjamin O. Davis Sr., the first black chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Colin Powell, and the first black commander-in-chief in the history of our nation, former President Barack Obama. Let me share with you some basic facts about Sam's life and military mission. Charles Young was born to enslaved parents Gabriel and Aminta Young in Mayslick, Kentucky on March the 12th, 1864. His father Gabriel escaped to Ohio without the family and joined the Union Army in 1865 and fought for freedom in the Civil War. The family later escaped and established residence in Ripley, Ohio. Gabriel was honorably discharged in 1866 and joined the family. Charles lived his formative years in Ripley. Charles had an exceptional education for a black person of the era. His mother, a mentor, and grandmother, Juliet, both were educated and tutored him. His father worked odd jobs using the money to provide Charles with music lessons. He learned to play the piano and violin. He loved music, and it served as a social bridge and pleasant diversion, especially during his West Point and military career. He graduated from high school in 1881 and went on to work as an intermediate teacher. In 1863, the Ripley Bee newspaper announced competitive examinations for the military academy at West Point. The news was brought to Charles' attention by his father, Gabriel. Gabriel was proud of his service during the Civil War and encouraged his son to follow in his footsteps. Aminta was not enthusiastic about Charles going to the military. Young received the second highest score in the testing, and with his father's encouragement, he was off to West Point. Prior to Young, 22 blacks had been nominated to the Academy. However, only 9 had been admitted, with 1 graduate at the time, Henry O. Flipper. John Alexander was in his second year. Racism was alive and well at West Point. Charles was socially isolated, with the exception of his contact with Alexander. When Alexander graduated in 1887, Young's only contact in West Point with his fellow white cadets was strictly related to their studies. Young graduated from West Point in 1889, becoming the 3rd black graduate in the history of the Academy. Following Young's graduation, no other black would enter the Academy until the 1930s. Benjamin O. Davis Jr. became the 4th black graduate in 1936. Newly commissioned 2nd Lieutenant Young was assigned to the 9th U.S. Cavalry and served at frontier posts Fort Robinson, Nebraska, and Fort Duchesne, Utah, from 1889 to 1894. It was customary for other commissioned officers to serve as mentors for new officers. However, Lieutenant Young was treated as an outcast at the post by white officers. He was accepted and highly respected by the sergeants and corporals who willingly shared their knowledge with him, just as Sergeant Waller had said. In 1894 to 1898, Young served as professor of military science at Wilberforce University in Wilberforce, Ohio. He was very much a part of the intellectual and civil rights conversations of the day. Among his contacts were W.E.B. Du Bois, Booker T. Washington, and Lawrence Dunbar. Young was a Renaissance man. He played and wrote music, poetry, and plays. He was a member of the Beta Kappa Sigma fraternity. He was later inducted as an honorary member of the Omega Psi Phi fraternity. Acknowledgements to the Omegas, who supported our efforts over the years in calling for the promotion. While serving at Wilberforce in 1896, Young was promoted to 1st Lieutenant. In 1898, during the Spanish-American War, he was appointed Major in the U.S. Volunteers in the Ohio National Guard. He was assigned to command the 9th Infantry Battalion. However, the battalion was not sent overseas. In 1899, Young was mustered out of the Ohio National Guard and returned to the 9th Cavalry with his regular Army rank of 1st Lieutenant, and served again at Fort Duchesne, Utah. Promoted to captain in 1901, Young commanded a company in the 9th Cavalry and led his men in combat in the Philippine Islands during the Philippine insurrection from 1901 to 1902. Just as Sergeant Waller had informed me, the 24th served with the 9th Cavalry in the Philippines. Upon returning to the States, the 9th was garrisoned at the Presidio in San Francisco. In 1903, while stationed there, Young was temporarily assigned as superintendent of Sequoia National Park. He was the first African American appointed as a national park superintendent. I would be remiss not mentioning the impact of Charles Young's presence in the San Francisco Bay Area. His wife Ada was a resident of Oakland. The Captain Charles Young Camp 6 United Spanish War Veterans Organization was established here in Vallejo. A headquarters house was built and still stands at 1209 Georgia Street. Young became the first African American officer appointed to duty as a military attaché, serving in Hispaniola, Haiti, and Dominican Republic, 1904 to 1907. He had a special affection for Haiti, it being the only black republic in the Western Hemisphere. It is reported that Haitian General Toussaint Louverture was one of his heroes. Young's goal was to one day become a general, with the ambition of seeing his people enjoy the fruits of freedom. Young returned to the 9th Cavalry and served at Camp McGrath in the Philippine Islands from 1908 to 1909. In 1909 to 1911, He served at Fort D.A. Russell, Wyoming. He served as military attaché in Liberia from 1912 to 1915, where he was promoted to major. He developed the Liberian frontier forces and added to the infrastructure of the country by building roads. For his exceptional work in Liberia, the NAACP awarded Young the Spring Guard Medal in 1916. The medal is the association's highest honor to an African American for noble achievements in any honorable field of endeavor. Young was temporarily assigned to the 10th U.S. Cavalry and served in the punitive exposition in Mexico under the command of General Pershing, also known as Blackjack Pershing, from 1916 to 1917. Under Pershing's command, Young was promoted to lieutenant colonel. His appearance before the promotion board in 1917 was a bittersweet experience. He received a promotion to full colonel, marking the first in U.S. Army history for a black soldier. Simultaneously, he was medically retired from active military duty. He protested his forced retirement. To prove his fitness for duty, Colonel Young rode horseback and walked 500 miles from Wilberforce, Ohio to Washington, D.C. He was recalled to active duty days before the armistice was signed, ending World War I on November the 11th, 1918. The reinstatement was too late for him to command troops in combat, which would have enhanced the possibility for his promotion to brigadier general. Returning to active duty, Young was assigned duty station at Camp Grant, located in Rockford, Illinois. The camp was a training base for black troops during the war. He was sent there to address the grievances of the black troops who felt mistreated by the white officers in command. The troops felt and were ill-equipped for the harsh Illinois winter weather. Following that brief assignment, he was reassigned as military attaché to Liberia. While on an intelligence mission, he became critically ill and died. He was buried in Lagos, Nigeria on January 8, 1922, with military honors rendered by British Army troops. Upon the insistence of Young's family and members of the national community, his body was exhumed and returned to the United States. He was reburied in Arlington National Cemetery on June 1, 1923. According to historical account, the day of his funeral, black schools in Washington, D.C. closed so children could join their parents in mourning his death. Thousands of people lined up the streets of the Capitol to observe the passing of the funeral procession. Charles Young's military history can best be described in his eulogy, written by historian and NAACP founder W.E.B. Du Bois, published in the February 1922 issue of the Crisis magazine. Quote, "The life of Charles Young was a triumph of tragedy. No one ever knew the truth about the hell he went through at West Point. He seldom even mentioned it. The pain was too great. Few knew what faced him always in his Army life. It was not enough for him to do well. He must always do better, and so much and so conspicuously better as to disarm the scoundrels that ever trailed him. He lived in the Army surrounded by insult and intrigue, and yet he set his teeth and kept his soul serene and triumphed. He was one of few men I know who literally turned the other cheek with Jesus Christ. He was laughed at for it, and his own people chided him bitterly, yet he persisted. When a white Southern pygmy at West Point protested at taking food from a dish passed first to Young, Young passed it to him first, and afterwards to himself. When officers of inferior rank refused to salute a colored officer, he saluted them. Seldom did he lose his temper, seldom complain. With his own people, he was always a genteel, hearty, half-boyish friend. He kissed the girls, slapped the boys on the back, threw his arms about his friends, scattered his money in charity. Only now and then behind the veil did his nearest comrades see the hurt and pain graven on his heart. And when it appeared, he promptly drowned it in his music, his beloved music, which always poured from his quick, nervous fingers to caress and bathe his soul. Steadily, unswervingly, he did his duty. And duty to him, as to few modern men, was spelled in capitals. It was his lodestar, his soul, and neither force nor reason swerved him from it. His second going to Africa after a terrible attack of black water fever was suicide. He knew it, his wife knew it, his friends knew it. He had been sent to Africa because the army considered his blood pressure too high to let him go to Europe. They sent him there to die. They sent him there because he was one of the very best officers in the service, and if he had gone to Europe, he could not have been denied the star of a general. They could not stand a black American general. Therefore, they sent him to the fever coast of Africa. They ordered him to make roads back in the haunted jungle. He knew what they wanted and intended. He could have escaped it by accepting his retirement from active service, refusing his call to active duty, and then he could have lounged and lived at leisure on his retirement pay. But Africa needed him. He did not yell and collect money and advertise great schemes and parade in crimson. He just went quietly, ignoring appeal and protests. He is dead, but the heart of the great black race, the Ancient of Days, the undying and eternal, rises and salutes his shining memory. Well done, Charles Young, soldier and man, an unswerving friend. End quote. What have we achieved on the behalf of Charles Young? Aside from us, me personally, being an absolute pain in the ass to the Army, and past presidents of the United States since Jimmy Carter, we joined Mason County Fiscal Court and the community of Mayslick, Kentucky, in the restoration of his birth cabin. The cabin was premiered to the public in 2014. At the behest of the National Coalition of Black Veteran Organizations, in 2018, Charles Young was awarded an honorary doctorate degree from Wilberforce University. In 2019, we nominated Charles Young and he was inducted into the Kentucky Civil Rights Hall of Fame. I was joined in representing him at the ceremony by retired Army Lieutenant General William Ward, former Judge Executive James Gallestein, retired Major Howard Jackson, Kentucky State Senator Gerald Neal, and Reverend Rodney Bennett. In 2020, Colonel Young was posthumously promoted Brigadier General in the state of Kentucky National Guard by Governor Andy Beshear. In 2022, with the assistance of Governor Beshear, the state promotion was federalized by then President Joseph Biden. The promotion brought to climax a 4-decade-plus advocacy on Charles Young's behalf by the National Coalition of Black Veteran Organizations. In 2023, the Kentucky Legislative Black Caucus presented legislation on our behalf calling for the designation of the Brigadier General Charles Young Memorial Historical Corridor. The legislation was signed by Governor Andy Beshear, establishing an 85-mile route from Nicholasville, Kentucky to the Kentucky-Ohio border in honor of the state's native son. The Ohio Legislative Black Caucus presented legislation expanding the corridor from the Ohio-Kentucky border to Xenia, the site of Charles Young Buffalo Soldier National Monument. The legislation was signed by Governor Mike DeWine. The route is the longest corridor in the nation named to honor a black soldier. In summary, Charles Young's military career spanned 33 years of segregated service. He was the highest ranking black American in the United States Armed Forces from 1894 until his death in 1922. Throughout his military career, he served with honor, respect, and appreciation from black troops and the national black community. He served under the motto, "For race and country." He served on the Western frontier and during the era of the Spanish-American War, the Philippine insurrection, and the punitive exposition. Again, he was the first black superintendent of a national park. Charles Young was a person of international influence in his capacity as military attaché in Haiti, Dominican Republic, and Liberia. He represented the United States during a period of racial tension at home and faced discrimination throughout his career. Charles Young did not just serve his country, he expanded what was possible within it. Every Black and minority man and woman who have reached the flag ranks in the armed forces owe part of their success to Charles Young's service. In closing, I encourage you to learn more about the history of Charles Young and other Black and minorities who have served in the defense of the nation. It is American history. A copy of the CD titled The Legendary Buffalo Soldier, narrated by me, is available through Golden Buffalo Publications. A few copies are available here at the museum. The dual disc CD contains, along with Young's history, a recital of select verses of his poetry. I recommend the following books: Black Officer in the Buffalo Soldiers Regiment by Brian Shalom, Acting on Hope by A.V. Hankins, A Soldier's Life, A Black Woman's Rise from Army Brat to 688 Champion by Edna Cummings, and The First Black Marines by Joseph Getter and Trevor Getz. There is also a permanent gallery for Black military history in the National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C. However, there's still work to be done in how Black military history is presented. Plus, there's still a statue to be erected in the General's honor in Washington, D.C. To the late Sergeant Waller, you were right. Charles Young should have been a general, and now he is. With faith and the help of many, I've done the best I could do. And to those who helped along the way, thank you. The Coalition's advocacy extends beyond Brigadier General Charles Young. Navy Seaman Dory Miller and Petty Officer Charles French are still due medals of honor earned for actions beyond the call of duty while serving in World War II. We hope the Vallejo National Museum would join as an endorser of our efforts at the appropriate time to gain those medals. The advocacy for historical and social justice continues, ready and forward. Thank you. Thank you. I would be more than happy to entertain any comments or questions that you might have. Yes.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm thinking of the monuments that we have to Captain Young, to Colonel Young here in Vallejo. It was men who served under him who helped start Second Baptist Church, Kyle's Temple, the NAACP, and fertilized number 27. So a large group, a contingent of Buffalo soldiers moved here around 1902 following the Spanish American War. So I'm just so grateful for you being here today to help tell that story, and that we here in Vallejo are the proud recipients of his leadership that continues to this day. So I want to just say thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate your comments on that. Appreciate it. Are there any other questions or comments?
Yes, sir. Did he have family that survived?
Yes, he does. Yes, he does. As a matter of fact, some of his family, some of the descendants of his have been involved with us over the years, working towards the promotion that we acquired for him. And at the same time, on an annual basis, we're hosting what's called the Freedom Festival in Kentucky. It's being done in conjunction with the National Park, Camp Nelson. His family is highly involved in helping make that possible.
Yes.
My name is Brenda Bromfield, and I'm with the Vallejo Sister City Association Commission, but I serve as a California State Representative for Sister Cities International. And when you mentioned that Charles Young has spent time overseas and gone to Liberia, you said, and you also said that he had gone to Lagos, Nigeria, which I presume is where he passed.
Yes.
I mean, that's rich history.
Yes.
I don't think a lot of us in this room necessarily knew that, but Vallejo has a sister city in Tanzania, Africa. And the fact that we have had, you know, such rich history like this is something that we need to take a little more seriously as it relates to our involvement locally and internationally before we really got involved internationally. So I want to thank you for sharing that with us. I think we're all richer and more wiser. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying that.
Good morning. I came late, but years ago, my name is Emmanuel Andres. Years ago, I went to Yosemite National Park,
Yes.
and a gentleman, park ranger,
Shelton Johnson.
became a good friend of mine, and that was my first time to hear of Buffalo Soldiers. It was very informative, and my question to you now is, by the way, thanks for your presentation, very insightful. My question to you is, the general, do you have any connection with California, Buffalo Soldiers? Because Buffalo Soldiers in California, they have very rich history, even in Yosemite. And do you have any connection?
Do I have any connection?
No, not you, but the general.
Yes, the general has tremendous connections to California.
Did you ever come to California?
As a matter of fact, there is currently an exhibit at the Golden Gate recreational area in San Francisco on General Young.
And a follow-up question would be, I'm from Ethiopia, Africa. You mentioned about Liberia.
Yeah.
At that time, what time frame are we talking?
You're talking about, well, he died over there. You know, you're talking about what, 1918, 1919, and he also was there, I think it was 1914, 16.
So that would be, you know, I'm not sure if folks know, so Liberia is founded by Americans.
Yes. Yes.
So it was a kind of U.S. territory at the time, or it was a country, independent country, Liberia?
Well, it was a country at that time, and he was sent there. Basically, he assisted with helping to establish the infrastructure for that country.
All right, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you say that there are no statues for African-American soldiers in D.C.?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear you.
Did you say there are no statues currently for African-American soldiers in D.C.?
There is the Civil War Museum there, they have a collage, which is a statue. I think it was done by Ed Hamilton. But there is no major statue in Washington, D.C. of a black soldier on horseback. Our work has been to try to establish such a statue on the grounds of the African American Museum, based on the fact that black military service has been extremely instrumental in helping with the passing of civil rights. And that seems to be a point that has been missed by the public at large and even the black community at large. And I say that because when you take a look at that National Museum, the smallest display, the smallest gallery in that institution is dedicated to black military history. In a facility that's 360,000 square feet, black military history has been allotted to 3,000 square feet, which is about the size of a house. So, you know, we're working to try to get that statue built on the grounds. of the National Museum there.
Is there a way to donate to that, or is there somebody already in the works doing that?
We're in the works of trying to develop it, and we're not in the process right now of even collecting money on it. We're talking about it and trying to get the public involved or interested in the idea, in hopes that when it comes around time, if we can get public support for it.
Thank you.
Yes.
So I just rise to thank you for the lesson today. On behalf of the NAACP Vallejo Branch 1081 and the National Council of Negro Women and Milwaukee, which is the Black Women Organizer of Political Action, we just want to say thank you and we appreciate the lesson. We thought we were going to be late because our youth were reading at the grocery store today, our NAACP youth unit, and we were there. But I came in time limit, and I want to thank everyone for allowing me to get in the picture. So we thought we were on time, but I had to stop and get some fries. So I just want to say thank you, and we thank Mary and Trevor for sharing the information that you were coming and that you were on the way. So I'm sorry our youth aren't here. They're having lunch, and then we have another event after this. But for the officers from the NAACP, you all just wave. We have a few of our executive committee officers here. We want to just thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you coming. Are there any other comments?
And Charles, I just want to say thank you, and I feel so lucky to have met you through Linda.
Well, likewise, Mary. I appreciate you, and I'm honored by the invitation. As I told you a little bit earlier, I normally don't do public speaking. I'm not very good at it. I'm a bit better at taking notes and writing, okay? But I wouldn't have passed this up for nothing in the world. I appreciate it. I appreciate the audience. Yes, ma'am.
I was going to just say some feedback on public speaking. I could feel the tears you were holding back right towards the end there. You were very effective at it.
Yes.
You should do more public speaking.
Well, thank you for saying that, but I think I'm going to pass on this. Okay.
I just had a question. Your research on African Americans in the military does it go further on through history, how far, like say through Pearl Harbor and all the way through?
Yes, we go back to the colonial times, the Minutemen. You know, there's a misconception on the part of a lot of people that blacks served in every war and conflict that this country has ever been engaged in. And it's not true. And I say it's not true because during the Indian Wars of 1835 to 1842, a part of the military's goal was to recapture runaway slaves and return them to the property owners, the plantations. Black enlistment was banned in the United States Armed Forces during that period of time. And I think it's very important to our kids that they understand our people were not responsible for rounding up our people and sending them back into slavery. So no, we did not participate in every war and conflict. That was one that we passed on. Yes, sir.
I'm curious if you've had a chance to visit the Firma Lodge on Georgia Street.
No, I have not.
How long are you here? Can we arrange it?
Well, I have a driver with me. We can go by there. I'd love to go by. I'd love to go see the statue that you have of Charles Young, Captain Young, also while I'm here in town. Yes, ma'am.
Hey, Charles, I was under the impression too that you were going to maybe touch on the Fort Chicago situation that happened in our region, because a lot of the men that were killed are either involved in the court-martial situation in Fort Chicago, lived in our region, Benicia and Richmond, and it really affected us. And so I understand that recently, and I don't know how recent, but maybe we could
inform us about what they're going to do at Treasure Island, or if there's anything in the works, or...
To be honest about it, I am not familiar with what's going on here in regards to that, but I am familiar with the Port Chicago incident. I was also a big cheerleader for the push to get those men exonerated. They had been pardoned, which I thought was totally inadequate. Being pardoned implies that you did something and we're excusing you for doing it. They were exonerated, which cleared the record, which was what should have happened, and it has. And I really do salute the Navy for taking the step in
We
doing
have a
it.
Port Chicago memorial here.
Okay.
And also, I would encourage everyone to take a look upstairs in the Saginaw Gallery. There's a place of honor for all of Port Chicago, and specifically the story about Freddie Meeks and the exonerated.
Yes, ma'am.
Thanks so much for the presentation. It's really interesting and wonderful. I was just wondering if you had any social media or a website or a blog or anything where we can follow the progress of the steps that you're taking, or if there's an online petition that we can then find for erecting the statue, as you said, in DC, if there's any kind of way we can follow what you're doing after today.
We're in the process of putting together a web page and so on and so forth. You know, you'd be surprised. I've been at this for the better part of my life. And as far as technology is concerned, that's really not my bailiwick. I mean, I have some people that have come aboard that are willing to help us with that. And hopefully in the near future, we're going to have something up, and we'll be able to communicate it to the museum here to find a way to get the word out. Yes, sir.
Yes, Jay Armatulip, the current vice mayor here in the city of Vallejo, and on behalf of the mayor and the rest of the city council, we want to thank you, thank Miriam and Trevor for putting this all together. Because here in the city of Vallejo, we are very fond of the rich history that we have here, and we want to thank you for adding to that history with the stories and the knowledge that you've shared with us today. So thank you for being here on our behalf.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
How close is Dory Miller coming to get his Medal of Honor?
Well, I'll tell you, we've been asking for that Medal of Honor since Jimmy Carter was president. Now, how close are we to getting it? That's a good question. It's a very good question, and to expound on that at this point would take me into a political conversation that I don't think would be appropriate at this point in time, okay? I'm a little bit stickish on the fact that, I'm going to say this without saying any names, okay? A dishonorable person cannot honor somebody. And we refuse to ask the dishonorable person to bestow that honor. I hope that's understood. Yeah. So we know it's at least 3 years away. Okay. If there's no other questions, again, I really truly appreciate the opportunity to have been invited to be here. And I appreciate each of you taking your time to come and listen to what I have to say. With that said, much love. Thank you.